Welcome back all. Coleman Report Live, February 28th edition. Lance was complaining about little ice on the road, Lance.
We had interstate bridges, Bob, and tractor trailer rigs were blocking the bridges and traffic was backed up 20 miles.
That's all right. Hey, special guest, John Rockwell. He's a Business Development Officer, TMC Financing. John, welcome. We're going to start with you. What do you do?
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. I work for TMC Financing. I'm the Business Development Officer down in Southern California. That basically means that I'm the liaison between banks, borrowers, and TMC for SBA 504 loans. Those of you who aren't familiar with TMC, we've been around for over 30 years. We're one of the oldest and largest CDCs in the country. We're headquartered in Northern California, but we operate in California and Nevada. Last fiscal year, 2018, we were the largest CDC by volume in California and Nevada. So we're hoping to build and sort of continue that success this year. From wood, government shut down.
You've had it. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. You've had an interesting way that you've parachuted into this. You started with a partner, correct?
I did. So for a few years as an interlude between real estate finance jobs, I was with Partner Engineering and Science, more specifically Partner Energy, their green sister company. So I got to know a lot of CDCs and a lot of bankers through the green public policy goal doing the energy audits that the SBA required. Down level 504? Yeah.
That's why we have you on. What's going on with green 504 these days? Now, it's not codified, but the unofficial rule is 3 projects, 16.5 million max. But I've never seen that in writing.
Yeah, so over the last couple of years, there have been some changes in the green public policy goals. Last year, they did put out that quote-unquote hard cap, both in the dollar amount and in the project cost. So we're looking at 3 max debentures, that's 5.5, that get you to that 16.5. That's kind of the method to the madness there, and that is limited to 3 projects. Most recently...
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd like to know more about that. What is a green 504 project? How does that work? How does that have to be structured?
Sure. Traditionally, the 504 program borrower is limited to $5 million on the second government mortgage, either on one large project or a handful of small projects. But them as a borrower, they cannot go over $5 million. If they use the green public policy goals, the SBA essentially ignores previous borrowing and allows them to do a max debenture on that current project. So they could have a $2 million SBA loan outstanding, a $3 million SBA loan outstanding. Want to do a new project, get $3, $4, $5.5 million debenture for that new project by going green, usually installing solar panels, or in some cases, they can do energy conservation, energy reduction. And that might be a nice segue.
How difficult is it to do these type of projects? I mean, are they common? Is just we do some construction, or is this pretty capital intensive type of stuff?
If you fit a certain box, basically a sort of tight relocation box, old property to new property, you can do probably the lowest hanging fruit option, which is energy reduction. Compare your old location to your new location, show that it's 10% more energy efficient on a square foot basis. But what most borrowers are eligible for, and what we see them doing, is the generation goal. That's where you have a standalone project, either acquisition or new construction, and you need to generate energy on that project, most typically solar PV panels. The new SOP that's going into effect April 1st raises the generation limit for that specific goal from 10% to 15% of the whole project energy consumption.
Is that a major change?
I mean, it's a 50% increase, but it depends on the asset type and how they consume energy as to how that would impact the project cost. For something like a hotel, we have a relatively small physical footprint and a relatively large energy consumption as a ratio. It will be meaningful to their bottom line. It'll increase the project cost, say, from $250,000 to potentially $400,000, and that would give some borrowers pause about, is it worth doing for them now? For someone like a warehouse with a lot of real estate on the roof, relatively low energy consumption, it's almost non-issue.
I'd love to talk to people in the field. You are definitely in the field. What's going on with SBA processing times on 504 loans post-SBA shutdown?
Yeah, we were all wondering how the SBA was going to react to the longest shutdown in history, and it's been phenomenal in our experience. They've been processing better than pre-shutdown. Most recently, we've had a few new applications approved within 1 or 2 business days, which
nice.
I think, yeah, the best times prior to the shutdown were seemingly like 3-4 days. So they've really pulled out all the stops, staffed up big time. I think right after the shutdown, some 327s and some lingering backlog were taking longer. But as far as I can see, they've all caught up and everything's pretty much going smoothly now.
Well, that's good news. Hey, John, I appreciate you stopping by. Give us a little background of what's going on in 504 and Green. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Hey, let's go to the polls. Poll question number 1. This is one of Lance's favorite questions. Is there a designated person at your institution who keeps up with the changes in the SBA SOP? Why do you keep asking this question, Lance?
Bob, it's going to be fun to see the responses today because we did a webinar on the new 5010 5K, and a majority of those participants did say that there was a person. But I would suspect, Bob, that those people who participated are the people who keep up with it. And it's great to see, Bob, because every small business lending institution needs to have someone who studies and attempts to understand the SOP to help interpret all that gray but to help the bank, the lending institution, do the SBA lending in a compliant way. So every institution needs the so-called SOP expert.
The new SBA SOP 5010-5K relaxes documentation of equity injection for 7A loans less than $350,000.
Bob, there is a correct answer here, but after we see the responses, I want to share real quickly how I feel about this. So the answer is yes. The SOP 5010-5K on SBA Express, Export Express, and SBA small loans under 350. The SOP 5010-5K, Bob, states that you no longer have to verify equity injection on loans of this type and this size. However, there is some conflicting information in the SOP. I still feel like it is a prudent lending practice to verify the source of the equity injection and to document the equity injection. Now, when it says relaxes, Bob, there's a caveat. It says you no longer have to collect it unless your bank would do it on a similar size non-SBA loan. So if you have a $350,000 non-SBA loan and you verify equity injection, you have to continue to do it. But I actually believe, Bob, that they may come out with a CFR or something that changes this, even if they don't. I've worked in the purchase demand package business for a while, and I just, as a prudent lender, would not feel comfortable with not documenting the equity injection source and documenting it actually being put into the business.
Excellent. Do you believe your institution documents credit available elsewhere correctly?
Well, there's the answer, there's the canned answer, and then there's reality. Credit elsewhere is kind of a moving target. SBA's always explained to us what are acceptable forms of credit elsewhere. I'm glad to see that, but the one thing I want to point out, it's important to note that credit elsewhere is important in SBA underwriting, that you have to have it in your credit memo and you need it documented. You have to certify that credit was not available elsewhere. So you not only need it in your credit memo, but you need that credit elsewhere certification in your loan file. And it has been an issue of importance with SBA for the last 2 or 3 years and will continue to be. So if you don't feel comfortable with how you're doing it, you ought to, again, we'll repeat the SOP 5010-5K webinar, and we talk about it and how you should document it in that webinar.
And our last question is, I have read the new SOP.
Bob, I am a yes for that one.
Yes, I know you are a yes. See who else is in your category. Really, I'm shocked at that number. That's a higher number than I would think. So good for you with the 33%. Good for you. Or 31.
Absolutely is, Bob. It's only been out a couple weeks, but it becomes effective soon. But I encourage you to, at the very minimum, get some training on the SOP 5010-5K and its changes, and look at the notice. It helps to discuss some of the changes and differences.
Rich has corrected me, by the way. Rich, thank you. The $16.5 million aggregate is in the SOP 5010-5J, page 338. Thank you, Rich. I did not know that. So I'm glad that that's there. Hey, Lance, this was a question on the new SOP. We're talking about performance bonds. What are we telling Tammy?
Well, if you look at the old SOP, the 5010-5J and the 5010-5K, in terms of using a third-party construction monitoring firm to monitor construction and disperse the loan, that really hadn't changed. The change was SBA added language that if your institution has a construction monitoring firm that would monitor construction and disperse funds on similar size non-SBA loans, you now can get the same waiver for in-house construction monitoring as well. So that, his question is 5010-5J and 5010-5K saying the same thing in regards to the third-party construction monitoring? The answer is yes, it didn't change.
Kathy asked the question of the borrower affirming to the lender that they will not lease out a portion of their facility to a business that is illegal according to SBA's terminology. Signing that certification, is that sufficient, Lance, or do we want to go one step further?
Well, Bob, the 1919 actually has some language in the borrower's certification that does discuss this exact thing. But SBA, decided to include in the 5010-5K the requirement of that certification, which is kind of cryptic language, Bob, that tells me SBA wants to see something more, because the 1919s, their form, they know that it's in the certification. So I'm going to recommend that you include it if you have a situation where an SBA borrower finances commercial real estate and they're going to lease a portion of that real estate. I recommend having an additional certification from the borrower stating that they're not going to lease the property to someone operating a business that's illegal on a federal, state, or local level.
Ashish asked the question regarding credit elsewhere. We have someone on their personal financial statement that they're reflecting a lot of cash on their personal financial statement, but they're saying that they are, go ahead and move up one more, guys, that they are going to use that for the business. How do we resolve that?
Well, first of all, Bob, I'm going to answer the slide that's up there, which no SBA does not have a form. You'll have to create your own form. Ashish's question was related to someone reflecting a lot of liquidity, but they're trying to indicate that that's necessary for working capital for affiliates. I think you're going to have to do a pretty deep financial dive and look at those affiliates and look at their working capital needs. And quite frankly, if the affiliates need the working capital, it needs to be moved off the personal financial statement and into the affiliate business's financial statement.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Today is the last day for submissions for 2019 SABW of the year. And also the summit. By the way, we were confusing people. We called it 2018, 2019, and finally Joseph came to me and said, Dad, it's 2019. And I had this case, and we're all on the same wavelength on that. If you're interested in attending, also, we're going to be coming out with that. There's information on the website. Shoot me an email. If I can get them by tomorrow, that's fine, but I definitely need them by tomorrow. This was an interesting, I don't cover these a lot, but SBA has some very cool programs that perhaps you have someone that you can refer over to them, one of your applicants, one of your borrowers, one of your customers. And this is something that they're doing in terms of emerging leaders, and they're very strong on mentoring small businesses. So I thought this was a great program. I think they generated more than $300 in new financing, guys.
Well, and all of you,
there's $1 million missing there.
well, Bob, I think all of you should probably be receiving emails from somebody in your district office in regards to this Emerging Leaders program. I've gotten 2 emails in the last week.
Yeah, so it's pretty good. Hey, and I like to run these stories from time to time. This is a QuickBooks study, and it's also global. But let's remember that running these businesses is tough. So 61% struggle with cash flow. Nearly a third are unable to meet payroll, pay vendors. And make sure when you're talking to these applicants, you understand their situation. I mean, Lance, I know you work with a lot of people who they're hurting.
Well, Bob, one thing I want to point out, the SOP 5010 5K and J both state that we should analyze the working capital needs of any small business applicant, and we certify on the SBA Form 1920 that they have adequate working capital. The SBA Express revolving line of credit is an amazing product for you to potentially provide that source of money needed to kind of take away some of the angst that small business owners have meeting their monthly obligations. I think, Bob, I love to see a business get the loan to get into business, but also have the working capital revolving line of credit to help them stay in business. And it is reflected in the SOP. There are a couple of statements that state that it's the participant lender's duty or job to not just make loans to get people in business, but to figure out a financing package that will keep them in business.
I'm a big fan of these regional conferences. We're missing a couple. We're missing the NADCO and NAGO that should be on this list. But please, go to these regional conferences, support them. They get the buy-in from Washington, D.C., a lot of great content, very minimal expense. I would strongly urge you to support those. Lance, you're doing a couple webinars. You're going to repeat the 5010 5K. You're also going to do one. Give us a little glimpse on what are we talking about at SBA invoice for guarantee denial.
Well, there are some common reasons why SBA either denies a guarantee or recommends a repair on a guarantee. And I think quite often participant lenders get a denial or a repair and they just throw their hands up and say, okay, you don't have to do that. There are some things you can do to mitigate a proposed repair. There are also some things you can do when a denial is recommended to potentially overcome that. But you don't have to just throw your hands up and say, oh, we made a mistake. There are some things you can do. So what I want to do is first talk about what are the causes of guarantee repair and denial, but then try to offer some recommendations on how to deal with it if SBA is proposing a repair or denial. Very
good. And next week, I will be doing this show live from Puerto Rico. Joseph and I will be there. So we'll get some special guests in there. We'll tell you what's going on in Puerto Rico and USDA. And with that, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Talk to you next week.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.